but the craving claws at me every time I'm lonely. Parents shouldn't bury their children, I keep going, but this road ends somewhere, I just hope that they know me. We all got some things that we're going through. Stop living in the day it all broke you. Some things that we're going through. Demons chase the brave and they chose you. You don't know my life for anything that I'm about. I was left for dead, counted out, so I'm out. Standing in the streets, tears running down my cheeks. I'm starving, need to eat, but I'm chasing down this dream. Used to sleep in the trap house, trying to take the rap route, stay up all night.
A lot of it, like for men now in this age of 2022, a lot of this is really not their fault because it's the way they're raised. If they're raised by, even in an intact marriage, we'll say, an intact marriage where their father gets angry at something and he picks up a heavy object and throws it across the room. And somehow the wife has tolerated this for 35 years, 40 years, okay? So this is what this son is learning from. You can't put all the blame on, these guys, we'll say these guys behaving badly. Not all of them behave badly because there are some good guys out there. I know there are. But people aren't being raised right in this era. And that means men and women. They're just not being raised right. There's no boundaries, even spiritual boundaries. People aren't, wanting to go to church, for lack of a better example. Caring, like when you drop someone off at the door, you wait till they get in the house, just, the small things. Right. People aren't taught these small things. I'm talking men and women. So society essentially has crumbled.
Yeah.
And I think that also has to go along with technology. These computers are advanced. These cell phones are advanced. People are just texting. They're not communicating appropriately. And then they'll take a text and read it the wrong way when that's not what that person really meant to say on the other end. So these young people, they really don't know how to communicate at all.
No, I read a study about college students that didn't even know how to spell because they spent all their time doing that shorthand text. So when someone came along and said, "Hey, spell this for me," they were like, "Hey."
Right.
Part of that, I learned this over the past couple decades. There's actually been a change in how reading is taught in schools. They don't use phonics anymore. They use some sort of method that came out of New Zealand that's been actually disproven by cognitive neuroscientific research in terms of how we read. So they're trained to look at pictures and use context to figure out words rather than actually sound them out phonetically.
Yeah.
And because of that,
don't get me started on
reading
that.
proficiency has actually suffered immensely in the U.S. public school system. I actually only learned this recently. Thankfully, my parents, got me hooked on phonics as a kid. I learned to read before I was in school. They were also still teaching phonics at the time. So I was very fortunate and I learned to appreciate reading. But there are a lot of kids nowadays that just, because they're not getting that same education, they never learn to appreciate reading. And it's a shame because, that's another thing that goes along with what both Marianne and I have been saying about some of the traditional values that come from this. Now, I don't know specifically. Maybe you could shed some light on this, Chris. When it comes to the Native American home, there was a lot of oral history. Some tribes had written language, but how reading may or may not have been emphasized in the home. At least storytelling, I assume, would have been with the oral histories. But I would be surprised if that was not is not part of the value system in Native American culture.
Oh yeah, yeah. Songs, stories. Some tribes cave paintings. Aborigines were a lot into cave paintings, but it was a cross section of tribal history and directions. So they kind of went back and forth there. The only ones that could decipher which was what was the Aborigines themselves. Anybody else that came along was just like, oh, nifty. But yeah, it's in American Indian history and Aboriginal history both. It's more unwritten and it's just passed down from generation to generation, and that's what they are all losing out on. Even in Australia, they're losing the cave paintings, and a lot of those elders aren't around to tell those stories anymore because of that genocide that happened back in that day. A lot was pulled away. Most of them became alcoholics because they didn't know what to do in a white life, and they were being
Oh yes,
forced to live that
alcoholism.
white life,
Yeah, if I remember my history correctly,
and they just crumbled.
alcoholism was a big issue among the Native American populations. Uh, you know, during these assimilation attempts, this was a very common issue,
Yeah,
and it truly is a stain on our history. And look, as you know, as a Jew myself, I understand the fear and emphasis on not erasing history because that is the quickest way you repeat it. We've seen the toppling and replacement of statues,
right,
renaming of schools, a lot of this stuff that uh, because I think Bill Maher called it presentism. We're measuring everybody based on the standards of today, which is not necessarily a good thing. And when we take a lot of these
right,
markers down, we're for, we're forgetting. It doesn't mean that we have to hold these people in the same endearment that we did, let's say, in 1900. But it does mean that if we remember it,
right,
those lessons are not forgotten, and we don't end up repeating it. Because if if you use the phrase that comes from post-Holocaust, never again, that should apply in in so many other respects, whether it's Native American history, and how they were treated in the United States and the Aborigines in Australia, or it was the Holocaust or the Crusades when it came to the Jews. We need to take history
right.
more seriously than we do. You look at even Americans when you pull how much they know about U.S. history and U.S. civics, it's embarrassing. Uh, the majority of native born, well, not native born, but Americans born in the U.S. they can actually pass the citizenship exam is embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Oh yeah,
Yes, yes.
I've seen
It,
those numbers.
it is truly embarrassing how few people understand their own history, at least here in the US.
Yeah, I focused more on my Australian history because I was always drawn that way than I
Mhm.
did my American history. So I'm completely guilty. I'd fail that test.
Well,
They'd kick me out.
well, well,
You're not American.
Australia has a very rich and riveting history. So you're not missing, you're not necessarily getting. a less epic read. It's it's full of drama
Right.
and full of tragedy. Uh, it, it, Australia has a very interesting
Yeah.
history even
Yeah, it is.
before the Brits arrived. The
Mhm.
Aborigines have a history at
Right.
least as rich as that of Native Americans. E-
Oh,
exactly.
they were
Until
homies at one point. That's
yep,
that's been proven by
until they
DNA
weren't.
now.
Until they weren't. So so
Yep,
yeah,
until they weren't.
there
Yep.
there there is nothing wrong with taking more of an interest in Australian history, particularly if that's where your heritage is from. Uh, and even looking at Australia today, an Australian culture. It is so unique in its own right because of its geographic isolation that although yes, it is civilized in part of the Western world, the environment, the wildlife, the uh, the isolation in general of Oceania until very recently with modern air travel and everything
Right.
else has really allowed Australia to have this unique trajectory in so many ways unique from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
I agree with that. I'm ready to go back. Just to the bush. I don't want to be a part of any of the shoreline. I just want to go out in the desert.
It can be quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like
Don't
about it.
don't worry. I
I
hear
like the
Twitter can
quiet.
still reach the Australian desert.
There's no escape.
Oh. Yeah. Nope, I don't think there is any escape from Twitter.
Twitter and the people about your
Well,
car's extended warranty.
that's it.
They'll
Oh
be
yeah.
sure to reach
Yeah,
out.
Well,
yeah,
that
yeah.
too.
They'll get to me about my car's
If
extended
no one else
warranty.
cares about you, there is someone who will call you at least once a day, very concerned about your car's expiring warranty. There is always someone who cares enough to
Right.
check on your car's
I'll
warranty.
right.
or
Yes,
call
absolutely. No matter what
or
from what
call
country.
asking for funding.
Or it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
That too.
Need
Or
funding.
as an entrepreneur and business owner myself, I can't tell you how many people call trying to sell me something. Marketing. Hey, do you want a website? Hey, I can run ads for you. Hey, I can be your coach. I can, make you. You can make $6 million in the next 6 weeks if you only follow my program.
Hmm. Hmm.
I swear, I get uh, across
Oh yeah.
phone, social media, email. I get about, I would say, at least 15 of these types of inquiries a day.
Hmm.
Like that.
Right. Yeah. Me too. Um.
Well,
Do you
I
have
just like
anything else to add, Marianne?
about the
About any of it?
traditions that, along with the lack of communications, the parents aren't able to hand down the traditions, especially when the home becomes broken and a child is taken away for a period of time from the fit parent, we'll say, and those traditions from that family aren't being able to be passed down to that child. So, it's just these young people aren't learning what they should be learning about their own families.
Child Protective Services investigations are among the most frightening experiences a parent can endure. With CPS Protect's consulting services, you can now face them with confidence. Our consultations can prepare you for a CPS investigation before they arrive at your door. Or, if you're already under investigation, we can help you navigate it successfully. Our consultants are all experienced former CPS investigators. The services we offer are unique. There is no one else doing what we do to help you preserve your rights and protect your family. Contact us today. Visit our website at cpsprotect.com or give us a call at 844-633-KIDS. That's 844-633-5437. CPS Protects Consulting Services, saving children, preserving families.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that when you look at the discoveries that are made uh, on websites like Ancestry and 23andMe,
Hmm.
I think that speaks volumes uh, as to validating what you're saying, Marianne. If these conversations were actually had, now granted, there are some families that just didn't talk about a lot of this stuff. My father's side, in particular, was very close-lipped about the genealogy. They really didn't talk much at
Hmm.
all. Uh, but in those that, there are a lot that do talk. But the fact that there are so many people making these discoveries they had no idea about means that there are a lot of people who either A, aren't having that conversation, or B, aren't having the opportunity to
Hmm.
have that conversation. And now we see
Right.
children, people that are still having children tend to be having them later. So there is less opportunity, there are less generations that are around to actually pass on this information to. So
Hmm.
that's also a unique factor here. So Marianne, I think you're absolutely right. The government getting involved here is I don't think is a productive situation, but I think that there
Hmm.
does need to be a culture shift. We do need to have a desire to, within reason, of course, go back to some of these institutions. Do we want Jim Crow laws and, you know, a lot a lot of this, other stuff that obviously we're not proud of in our history to come back? No, but I don't think that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, either.
No, no, don't throw the baby.
Yeah, don't. Legally,
Keep,
there are
keep the
some very
baby. Toss
serious
the bathwater.
consequences. I guarantee
Bathwater.
you CPS will show up at your door if you throw a baby.
Yes, yes. Um, I wanted to touch back with the Indian Children's Act. Um, I noticed when I was looking around that a lot of people that want to undo it are white people wanting to adopt native children.
It does. And I
Does that
think
sound
that
accurate to you?
problem comes with it comes from the backlog of the family court. Because
Hmm.
and granted, I'm not speaking about the ideal as to how this should be. I'm speaking as to the institutions as they stand today. The family court has such a ridiculous backlog, and
Hmm.
that results in something that maybe could be resolved in 3 to 6 months, assuming it's a legitimate case and a legitimate removal, however rare those are, um, can take 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. And especially if it's a young child that's removed, there is a level of bonding going on, and it can be like that family is all that child has known. And unfortunately, when that happens, there is that bond that forms makes it very difficult to just rip the child and throw them into something that, other than initially in infancy or, maybe for their first year, that they had with their original parents, all of a sudden it's foreign to them. I think that we need to really get rid of the backlog and streamline the family court process if we want to do something a little more quickly rather than, as we discussed, something long term in order to avoid that from happening. I think it's the law, it's the term of this and the backlog that actually creates that bond that makes families want to adopt. Now, that doesn't exclude those that may be doing it for malicious reasons, like we've seen pop up a few times in Florida where there really is a scandal there. But when if you leave a child in foster care long enough and you give excuses for court backlog and you give excuses for, well, we need to do this and we need to do that and then we need to decide and we need to have another hearing, this is going to be a problem whether you're dealing with Native American children or not. And unfortunately, the majority of foster families are white. So whether or not it's that Native American children are purposely being placed with white families, or that is just what is available, and maybe there aren't other ethnicities, there aren't as many, so there's less of an opportunity, or that may be possible. I really don't know exactly the numbers on that, or if those have actually been collected, but I think the solution starts with optimizing and streamlining the system. Because when it comes to, if you leave someone with a family for 3 years and that's all they know, and that bond develops, that makes for a very compelling case for child welfare not to break that up. Now, whether that's a compelling case uh, from an argument of merit is a very different story from whether child welfare sees it from an authoritative standpoint as a good case.
Got anything on that, Marianne?
Well, I mean, I think everyone knows where I stand on CPS. you know, you know, they need to
Yeah.
be abolished, and there needs to be something else better put into place that is reinvented.
Reinvented.
I know we've had this discussion before. If Johnny's getting beaten up down the street, then you call the police. The police should be doing their job. There's removals that shouldn't even be happening, as we all know, based on a false accusation, false allegation. And there's a lot of those. It's just enough to really, I would like to see them abolished.
Yeah, what was it? There was a journalist on Twitter who was attacking a politician. What was it, last week? Do you remember this, Marianne?
I don't know if I saw it.
Yeah, no, no. It was a
Here in
politician in
Florida?
Virginia. It was a politician in Virginia,
Oh,
No, I'm
and
thinking of a different story.
the Virginia child abuse hotline was flooded with calls because this guy didn't like that. This journalist didn't like that this politician said she was teaching her child real history. I think she was anti-critical race theory. I think that was the issue, but this journalist decided that we need to flood Virginia CPS with calls to remove that child. Uh, so there are so many issues when it comes to that. Obviously, child protective services, as it stands today, is not a great system. However, I will say in my experience, there are a minority of cases where I have seen that there are people who truly do terrible things to children. As long as people have free will, they have the capacity to do good and the capacity to do evil, and it's truly terrible. So what I would say is, in those cases, when CPS does its job, in those cases, it is good. However, it's hard to justify CPS as it stands on those minority cases. Uh, I have discussed this on Marianne's podcast, Slam the Gavel, before. I think what really needs to happen goes back to what I said earlier about communities being more homogenous in their values, small communities. And you would need to actually take the government out of the equation. The government is so hard to hold accountable. Uh, Back in the day, you had societies for the prevention of cruelty to children, these local societies funded by wealthy benefactors that did the investigations in these communities. The remedial courts, the family and juvenile courts, did not exist until the 1960s. So this was handled in the criminal court where there were more rights. So what would happen is these investigators would go out, they would do the investigation, and if there was, if there was real abuse or neglect going on, they would actually team up with law enforcement, get warrants for the perpetrator's arrest, and it would go through the criminal court where there are much more robust protections. Granted, there are more significant consequences, but there are much more robust protections. And that's the way that it historically worked. I think that you need for a child protective service, it has to be independent of the government with the wealthy benefactors. And I think that there has to be more reliance on law enforcement where there are more robust protections for defendants. But getting the government to give up authority is very difficult to do.
Yeah. So how do we prove our case to the point where we can?
Well, I mean, part of it, from my perspective, what I've been trying to do is with my firm, CPS Protect Consulting Services, when we help families prepare for and navigate CPS investigations, if you look at Title 4, Title 4E of the Social Security Act, the reliance on prevention services and removal for a substantial amount of funding for child welfare services, if people are getting services from community-based organizations not affiliated with CPS, that funding is not coming through for these agencies to hire more people and do more for themselves, provide contracts to their friends to run the foster care case management and prevention services, then what happens is if that money is not coming in as much, if there are enough people who are prepared even before CPS arrives, then what happens is they're not getting what they need, so they're going to be forced to pivot. The only way that that the government is going to be forced to have that conversation and be forced to pivot is if the benefit that they're getting gets hit. So
Right.
I've been taking this into my own hands and trying to do this, practically speaking, based on my skill set and my experience. Marianne, I have to say her podcast, Slam the Gavel, she has done a great job growing it, and it is an important voice in this field, just like this podcast right here. The fact that now we have two podcasts that are starting, one that is more established and one that is starting to grow in this space, means that there may be more interest and there's going to be more content. I'm excited to see where that goes.
Me too. Me too. It's about the awareness, right? The more people that know.
Well, what it comes down to is
Yeah.
people who haven't endured a child protective services investigation need to care. Until that happens, this is going to be a losing battle. You need to get those who
Right.
haven't been subject to a CPS investigation to be worried about it too.
That's very difficult to do. I don't know if they want to turn a blind eye or if they want to live in Disneyland. But for example, I live in a neighborhood where they have a Facebook page. So I posted a person's story about their experience with CPS. And some individual put on there, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but, this is a subject we don't want to talk about in so many words. I can't remember. I know I took a screenshot of it. And I said, well, I understand it. It's an uncomfortable topic. I think that's what it was, an uncomfortable topic. I said, but, it's good that you said that because people need to learn from it. And then you know what? I was blocked for 5 days. So she censored me for 5 days. I thought, Okay, you've been warned.
There is a lot of mistrust among people these days. And so if you say, I've been a victim of CPS, well, the general public that tends to see Child Protective Services, those that have not actually endured a CPS investigation, they tend to see it as a rule as, well, they're doing a good thing protecting children. So if they found enough evidence, well, then you must have abused or neglected your child, and that means they did their job. It really comes down to a level of ignorance and a lack of trust. If you can't trust people, then you're going to look at, well, somebody saying this, that CPS was wrong, but what if I believe them and they actually were abusive or they were neglectful? I don't want to be the person who is duped into believing believing that somebody who claims they were wronged was actually doing something terrible to a child. They don't want to, most people don't want to be in that position. I will admit, it is sometimes a struggle not to fall into that pattern of judging somebody based on whether or not, they have, that just because somebody has a substantiated case that, well, maybe they did do something wrong. Um, I have managed to overcome that and give everybody that I speak to a clean slate. But I will admit, because of the way that society has gone, it is not easy to do. So I understand the ignorance and the lack of trust and the risk of being seen the wrong way that the general public has. Uh, it is very real, and getting past that is a mystery. Granted, I do believe that we are currently in the best position for that to occur because there's a lot of outrage nationwide over the COVID closures of schools and the consequences that have resulted for children academically. The parental rights have become a political issue, and as we saw in the Virginia gubernatorial election, parents have become an independent voting bloc in their own right, parents of minor children. And what that means is there is more mistrust of the government than there has been in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives the opportunity for voices that were initially dismissed to be given a second look in a way that they really haven't been in a long time. Whether or not this is for the better, we'll see. But I am optimistic that this could be the transformation needed for change.
Yeah, I'll try to stay positive with that. You have to go into life knowing that there's two sides of the coin. If you hear something about somebody, don't be so quick to judge and maybe look at two sides of the coin before you make a decision with people. People are too quick to believe everything they hear.
I agree with that to an extent. I actually believe there are three sides to every story. There's his side, there's her side, and the truth. Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody has their own perception and their own point of view. And the truth is, both sides tend to be mostly true when there's
Absolutely.
general agreement. But there's always some differences in perception, and it's in those differences that you find the truth.
True. True fact. Um, something rang when you were talking about people not wanting to be the one to let that possibility of abuse slide, right? To not be the one that doesn't remove that child from the home. And this is also a 200-year-old argument, which was happening at the same time the industrial school for the Indians was happening, is that they employed all these social workers who they told were doing something good. The government straight lied to the caseworkers and told them that they were doing something good, then turned around and lied to society and said that they were doing something good. So we are looping already because people hear one story from whatever media source that they go to or whatever files that they dig up. You know, we got people out here now rewriting CPS rule books and publishing them so that people will have them on hand. And so we're seeing that loop around again. This people don't want to be the one to let it go. People don't want to be the one to leave that child there in that situation. But then there's the argument of 17 children in the last 2 months that were left to die by CPS workers. So, where does this coin land? How are we supposed to trust anybody in authority?
Dogs are so much nicer.
Right?
I happen to like dogs better
Me
than
too.
people. And exactly what you're saying is exactly the reason why. That is the case study why I've always gotten along with dogs better than I have with people. Uh, is unfortunately in a free society, people where you have free will, people have the capacity to do good, and people have the capacity to do evil. The only way to to ensure control over everyone is to institute tyranny. Right now, we are in a very polarized society, and I think that's a problem. But what we truly need to do is redevelop that social framework that alerted us to a lot of these issues that we tend to turn a blind eye to right now. And take the action that is needed. Uh, Unfortunately, because of free will, I can't imagine we ever get to a point where this is never a problem in the world. Uh, but I can imagine a world where we are in a much better spot than we were. I think we are in a better spot than we were in 1801. I think we can get much better. I don't think that perfection is a reasonable goal to shoot for, but I think that we can get a lot better. And when we do see something like this happening, I think that we can be a lot more effective and act a lot more quickly than we do. How we get there, I think that's a very complex answer because there's society is such a complex unit, but clearly there is substantial evidence that we need to keep going. And that's why, regardless of the outcome of Holland v. Brackeen, the I.C.W.A case in the Supreme
Right.
Court, I think the fact that we had this conversation at all is so important.
I think so. I hope other people do.
Me too.
I'm just kind of really tired of seeing our rights slip away bit by bit. I think we need to be adding more rights instead of trusting the government to take care of us like we're children. I mean, don't get me wrong, most of us have reverted to childhood at one point or another. Um, Ignorance is running rampant nowadays, but
Well, that comes down to what I said about
yeah.
responsibility. In childhood, you don't have those same responsibilities. You want adults to return, You need to focus
Mhm.
on responsibility.
Right.
Take charge of your life.
For sure.
Mhm. And going back to the dogs, I know you like dogs, but these parents buy a dog for their kid, and this is Johnny's dog. And then Johnny doesn't do anything with the dog. Might take it for a walk, for a couple days, and then after that, he's on to playing basketball with his friends. So who gets stuck taking care of the dog? Either mom or dad. They're not making the child toe the line and learn responsibility that you have to take care of a living, breathing animal. And when I was young, I had a dog. I made sure it was fed and watered, and when it was time to go outside or whatever, kids aren't learning
Yeah, when I
those
was a
simple
kid,
things anymore.
I had to make sure that I had a dog. Her name was Annie. I had to make sure that she was fed, at least in the evenings. That was my rule. I had to take her for walks. I had to help make sure that she was exercised. Granted, was I perfect? No, I was still learning. So my parents stepped in and took on some of the burden as well. But that dog was Annie was in my name, and Annie was my responsibility. Uh, and that was so important, so important.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm trying to instill in my
Mm-hmm.
son right now is responsibilities, because he feels like he's responsible for nothing. we went
Well,
we went on that
well,
2,500-mile trip,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I his cart, the trailer that he pulled, that was his responsibility. Everything in it was his responsibility. Oh my God. You know how
well,
much harder
let me
that
ask
made
you,
that trip?
Mm-hmm.
let me ask you, how did he talk about it when he was, after the trip that he had accomplished handling the trailer after he was done with all the complaining about it?
Oh, he was the best. He was a pro.
It sounds like he was pretty proud of himself. He felt it's an accomplishment
Yeah.
to handle that. Those trailers are not exactly light.
No, no, it was a 100-pound trailer, 125-pound trailer. Yeah.
Exactly. And with all the provisions that are in there, if you lose that, if that gets damaged and you're out in the woods, that's a problem.
Yes. Yes, it was.
That that's where I talked
Mm-hmm.
about fulfillment. Is when you feel accomplished, when you
Right.
have taken on responsibility. It may not be fun while you're doing it, but you feel fulfilled after you've done it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, he had a good
Mm-hmm.
time. Still lacking on the responsibility though. Dishes?
Let me ask you, do you enjoy doing the
Nope.
dishes?
No, but I don't complain about it
Do
when I
you
do them.
complain about it when
Nope,
you
I will not. I refuse to complain about them while I'm doing them. No, I leave.
at least out loud?
Yes. It doesn't matter what happens
You still
here.
complain. You still complain. You just don't say it out
Yes.
loud to anybody
Yeah,
else.
I'm like,
Let's be let's be honest here. Let's quit lying. Let's be honest with our audience.
Ressa.
It's
Honesty is a
okay.
virtue. Isn't honesty a virtue?
Now everybody's ganging up on me.
No, just me and Jay.
Yeah, I am bitching on the inside. Trust.
Guilty
Yeah.
too.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of y'all's time.
All right. It's been a pleasure.
Always.
Always. That was great.
Yes,
I'm
thank you for
glad we
having
had
me
the
on.
talk, and
Thank you so much.
let's definitely usher forward in combining our minds to create a better future for our children. for sure.
Sounds good
All
to
right. All right. You guys have a good evening. Thanks
Definitely.
for stopping by.
Definitely.
me. Thank
All
you.
right.
You too, Chris.
You
Take
too.
care,
You
Marianne.
too. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Lately, USA is getting scarier. Half of the Americans I see all hate America. They hate the cops doing their best to take care of us and kneel for the flag and salt the soldiers that we're burying. I'm tired of the pissing and complaining. Why you living in America if all you do is hate it? You think it's brave to take a stand against the nation? Real bravery is dying for the right so you can say it. Dear America, what happened to Americans? Apparently no one's aware or cares that it's embarrassing. It's arrogance. Our greatest enemy was always slavery and terrorists, and now it's people in the country trying to burn the heritage. I can't help it, I just seem to see the world different. It ain't Republicans or liberals, it's mental illness. The internet is only interested in left opinions. Cancel culture's got more power lately than the First Amendment. If you don't like it, leave. We will not defund police. We don't want no riots in our neighborhoods or in the streets. We respect freedom of speech. We protect what we believe. We don't want nobody dead, so please do not tread on me. In America, your freedom ain't free. In America, got soldiers dying overseas. So America, you say what we believe. My America, I won't ever take a knee. Our freedom is the reason you can disrespect our flag. If my stars and stripes offend you, then I'll help you pack your bags. America, does anybody know what the hell happened to the patriots? Lately this nation is so ashamed and hating itself. Did everyone forget that people died to pay for this? Ungratefulness, United States gave everything to you just to help. I just wanna celebrate Thanksgiving with my family. I don't need your help to understand it was a tragedy. Can I just be thankful for my country eating happily without you trying to guilt me for the genocide and casualties? I can't help it, I just seem to see the world different. It ain't black or white, it's conflict designed by the system. I don't need your pronouns, all I see is men and women. Kids are taking pills for fun while people can't afford prescriptions. If you don't like it, go. Hate it, then don't call it home. We don't need no violence, got no time for all you radicals. Screw your status quo, we're not animals. I won't kneel for the anthem, cause the flag is what I'm standing for. In America, your freedom ain't free. In America, got soldiers dying overseas. So America, you say what we believe. My America, I won't ever take a knee. Our freedom is the reason you can disrespect our flag. If my stars and stripes offend you, then I'll help you pack your bags. America, you can hate the government and still love the country. The fundamental values of America are concrete. Republicans and liberals are dumb, to put it bluntly. They're labels that they use to create chaos and corruption. You can know the history and still be proud of where you're from. Every flag around the world is covered in a little blood. We started out United States divided is what we've become. If home is where the heart is, you should show America some love. In America, your freedom ain't free. In America, got soldiers dying overseas. So